Hey everyone, it's Brandy and welcome back to my channel, Brandy Janae's Bookshelf. Today I'm going to be going over all of my favorite reads from 2021. For my favorites of this year is a little bit differently. I think I always found this really hard to do because I was always looking at the books by how I felt about them, which ones were the most memorable, which is still obviously important for your favorite reads of the year. But I decided to only stick with my 5-star ratings because all of the books that are on this list ended up with 5 stars based on more than just personal enjoyment. I did have more 5 stars than what's on this list. Everything else was just like rereads for me, and obviously I'm not going to add those to a favorites for 2021. It's 9 books that I'm going to be talking about. I think it's like really like 11, but 2 of the sections are like mangas, and I'm lumping the manga volumes together instead of having their own separate. Just makes the most sense. So we're going to go ahead and start off with the first book that I finished in the year, and that is Rayberry by Jordan and Fuego, which is the first book in a YA fantasy series. In this book, we're following this character named Teddy Sai, who was born from a wish that her mother made. And that wish was to become the new ruler of the Eretzar Empire. And after spending 11 years growing up in isolation, Teddy Sai is actually sent off to compete to become one of the Crown Prince's Council of 11. However, once she's chosen, she actually has to fight against another wish that her mother made, which is for her to kill the Crown Prince so that, her mother could come and be the person in charge. This world was just so vast, so amazing. It was like one of those YA fantasies that made me realize why I still stick with YA fantasy. It was a beautiful world and the characters were amazing. They weren't always perfect, but there was something compelling about the characters that I just absolutely loved, and the world. And I cannot wait to get to the sequel. And as I mentioned with all of these, it's going to be more than just like one thing or just like my general feeling after I finished this that ended up skyrocketing this to one of my top books of the year. And it made me really happy for the rest of the reading year, because I was like starting off with this, and actually I think the next 2 were like the first 3 things that I finished, and all of them ended up being 5 stars. I was just like, because of that, it has to be an amazing reading year. I do apologize that most of this video is probably going to be along the same lines of me just rambling, but if you haven't already, go pick this up because this was amazing, and I can't wait, like I said, to read the sequel. So the next set of books that ended up on my favorites of this year were 2 mangas from the same series, and that is volume 2 and volume 3 of Prince Freya by Kiko Ishihara. Honestly, this probably should have ended up on my like 2020 list. I don't even think I filmed a 2020 list, but it should have been on my favorites of 2020, but ended up rolling over because I didn't have enough time to finish both of these. But in this series, we're following this character named Freya, who is living in a small town in the kingdom of Tyr. Both of her adopted brothers are working as, I think, guards for the royal crown, or the prince, or whatever it is, the crown prince. I don't know. They're both working as guards, or at least the older one is, and I think the younger one is maybe in training or something along those lines. And at the start of the first volume, they both come back to visit her because they haven't been back to see her in quite a while. And during their visit, Freya ends up getting caught up with some soldiers, and they end up saving her. After they leave, Freya actually ends up hearing those soldiers, who are actually from the neighboring kingdom, threatening to kill the older of the 2 brothers, which is, his name is Aaron. And she decides that she needs to run off and go tell them so that he doesn't end up getting killed. But once she actually gets to the palace or kingdom or whatever it is, she ends up running into the prince, finding out that he's been poisoned, and he asks her to take his place as a prince because they can't know that he has died, otherwise the kingdom of Tyr will fall, which is what they've been trying to prevent. In order to save the older brother from getting murdered, she decides that she's going to do that. And the series is kind of just following along as Freya ends up in this position playing the role of the prince and what ends up happening because of that. And you guys, when I say I don't think I have read a better start to a manga series, this had me so excited. I am not one who typically enjoys like historical type of series. I feel like war stories are kind of hit and miss depending on how they go, but typically like historical war stories aren't my thing. But I kind of got into it for this because it's like each of at least the first 3 volumes, each of the volumes built on the other one, and it just brought so much character development. It brought so much to the world, and there was just so much going on, and our main character Freya just had to kind of jump into it and find her way on her own. Like, people were there to give her direction, but at some point she has to like step up to the role of the prince because she's taking this role. Everyone thinks she's the prince, and like, I am speechless when thinking about this. Every time I think about the series, I just get super excited, and I'm just like, I need to read that again, like right now. One thing I will say about this story is that the mangaka did not hold back. Like, it was one of those stories, like, as soon as you start to get attached to a character or think something is going one way, someone ends up being murdered. It's like completely opposite. Something ends up happening, and it just like completely throws everything into chaos. And I think the reason why volume 4 didn't like stand on that level is because volume 4 was kind of like a lull in that constant battle. I think it's going to pick right back up at volume 5. But yeah, these 2 are both amazing. Like I said, both of these got 5 stars, and this series I can definitely tell is going to be an all-time favorite. I don't know how many volumes are planned for this series, but I am going to be along every step of the way. Unless something like major happens, I probably most likely will be sticking with this for however long it's publishing. Now, the next book that is on my list is one that was very much unexpected. Like, I thought I was gonna like it, but I wasn't expecting to love this as much as I did, and that is Amari and the Night Brothers by B.B. Alston. This is actually a middle grade fantasy, or like urban fantasy, following 12-year-old Amari Peters. At the beginning of the story, she's actually struggling after the disappearance of her older brother Quentin. She's mainly struggling because the people who are supposed to be investigating are basically chalking it up to another black man getting caught up in the wrong situation, and he's probably dead somewhere because he got caught up with the wrong people. And Amari just like does not believe that at all, and she's like fighting tooth and nail to keep her brother's name clear because she's just like, there's no way he would do any of that. And then one day, out of the blue, this briefcase ends up showing up, and it's actually an invitation to come try out to join the Supernatural Bureau of Investigations, I think is what it's called. Bureau of Supernatural Affairs. I'm thinking of something else, sorry. She finds out that her brother actually is the one who nominated her to get tested to possibly go to this, I think it's a school or summer camp or something along those lines, but her brother is the one that nominated her to go, and she is very much interested in going because she feels like this is going to be the key to figuring out what happened to her brother and maybe try to find him in the process as well. And you guys, when I tell you I am not a middle grade reader, I think I'm starting to slowly get to the point where I feel like I can enjoy middle grade, because for a while I felt like it was just like too young of an audience and it was just like nothing appealing to me. And then this came along and completely changed my mind about middle grade altogether. I think it's just one of those things, if it's done well, or if it's done well for me, that I will enjoy it. And this is one of those books that I wish I had when I was younger growing up, because I felt like I went through a stage of not really wanting to read, and this would have definitely changed that for me. Like, I wasn't one of those people who got into Harry Potter, but this is something that I would have absolutely loved. I loved having this little black girl in this position of power. She also had to deal with some discrimination and things like that, but she kind of kept her head up and went through it, and she did what she set out to do. And this was just so freaking good that I was like astonished, and I didn't want it to end, honestly. I was just like, as soon as I finished it, I was ready to pick it back up, but I was just like, I need to savor it so that when I reread it, I'm gonna love it that much more. I don't think I did, but I need to go and actually pre-order my copy of the sequel, because I am probably gonna read this as soon as it comes out. But this was so freaking good. The characters, the setup, the plot, everything that this world had was just like chef's kiss. It was amazing. Not only am I looking forward to reading more from this world and these characters, but I cannot wait to see what else BB Austin does in the future. Like, yes, this is like, this is it. This is it right here. Okay, I feel like I'm like super excited, so I'm getting through these way quicker than the last video I did. But moving right along, the next set of books that I have to talk about is the other set of manga that has made its way to my 2020 favorites, or 2021 favorites, sorry. I think this is another one that probably would have went up on my 2020 favorites if I had actually filmed the video, because I'm pretty sure I did not. But sorry, I need to actually tell you what it is. That's volume 5 and volume 6 of I'm so excited I forgot the title. This is volume 5 and 6 of Sweat and Soap by Kentetsu Yamada. This is an adult like romance, I guess, manga series. In this story, we're following these two characters, Asako and Notori, who both work at the same company, which is Lily Drop, I think is the name of the company. Anyway, Asako actually works in the financial department, like accounting, things like that, and Notori is working in like research and development, and he has a very sensitive nose, I guess, if that makes sense. The story starts out very weird. If you haven't heard anyone talking about that, just kind of be wary of that going into it. But Asako has always had like a really strong, she feels like, body odor. She sweats a lot, and because of that, you know, she has a lot of body odor, so she's always like having wipes around her throughout the day. Like, she goes to the bathroom to wipe down in the middle of the day. But she's kind of gushing over the new product line that's about to come out one day, and Notori ends up walking past her in the hallway, and he's very intrigued by her scent. He asks if he can use her as his inspiration to come up with the new product line he's working on. And then from there, kind of a romantic relationship ends up starting between the two of them. It is very strange at the beginning of the story, because it's almost like a smelling fetish, and I was very kind of like weirded out by that, but I quickly got over it with how cute and like mature and how full-bodied this story and romance was. It was just amazing. You know, getting a little bit later into the series, I kept thinking I'm gonna get to a point where I'm not really enjoying the series, because it's like kind of repeating the same thing over, and then it's gonna get, you know, of course, because of that, it's going to get repetitive. But even when it was like similar situations happening, or somewhat similar situations happening, it still felt like things were moving forward at a natural pace. But at the same time, they were very adult about every little thing that happened. They might get upset, they might take a moment to like think about what they're feeling, but then they eventually come back together and they talk about it, and they figure out what is going to work best for both of them. And it is just like, it was a breath of fresh air, because, you know, most romances are like, we're gonna throw in all the communication issues, and then it's all gonna be good when we figure out it wasn't actually what we thought it was, and we're gonna keep on going. But this one is like, no, if something's wrong, we're gonna ask about it. If we need a minute, we're gonna tell the other person we need a minute, and then we're gonna come back like a mature adult and talk about it. And this was supposed to be ending this year. However, the final volume ended up getting pushed back. I think if it hadn't got pushed back, I would have had this entire rest of the series on here, but it did, and I ended up not getting the rest of the volumes until I ordered. It's like in that big manga order that I'm still waiting for, because of literally one manga is still out of stock. So I'm still waiting on that, but that will be happening this year. But as far as these two, amazing. I don't even remember what exactly happened to both of these unless I flipped through them, but I just know that the story in general is So beautiful. Sticking with the romance kick, the next one that I have is Act Your Age, Eve Brown by Talia Hibbert, which is the third and final book and the companion of the Brown sisters. In this one, we're following Eve, who has always had trouble with sticking with one thing in her life. She has had a lot of different like job opportunities or careers, things along those lines that she has wanted to pursue, but the minute anything negative happened or something, even the tiniest thing didn't work out for her, she's just like, okay, this isn't for me. I need to move on to the next thing. And at the start of the story, her parents have kind of had enough, and they tell her that she's cut off from her trust fund until she can hold down one job for at least a year. She's kind of desperate, but she's also really upset because she feels like her family doesn't understand her, and there is just something wrong with her where she's not able to stick with anything, even if she has like a strong passion for it. And then she's trying to figure out where she's going to work. She ends up stumbling upon this bed and breakfast that's in desperate need of a chef. And she has some experiences of being a chef, and she decides on a whim that she's going to go apply. And when she does, she meets the owner of the bed and breakfast, and he's just like not having her last minute nonsense. He's just like, you know, this is serious and you just like walked in randomly. It's not gonna work. She's actually on her way trying to leave the town, and she ends up running over him or hitting him with her car, and because of that, he's not able to do his duties as the owner of the bed and breakfast. So she agrees to help him out until he recovers, and that obviously leads into her unintentionally working at this bed and breakfast. Going into this, I kind of had high expectations because of how I have felt about what I've read from Talia Hibbert in the past. But on the same note, I was also not convinced that I could like Eve just as much as I had liked Chloe and Danny, which I know was kind of weird to think that way, especially because I felt the same way about Danny going into that book, and I absolutely love that one as well. But like going into this one, I also knew that I was always wondering in the back of my head while reading the other two books, like why Eve was always flitting around between different things. Because I think in the first one, she had talked about opening a bakery, and I was like really excited for that. And then, you know, the next book, she was like doing another thing, and I was just like, well, okay, well, what's going on there? So going into this, I was just like, I'm not really sure how this is gonna play out, which I shouldn't have expected anything less, because Talia Hibbert has a way of putting together a story that just makes it seem so real, and just like everything about it is just like so amazing, especially when it comes to the romance. She just has a way of writing two characters that feel like they fit together so well. Like no matter what's going on, no matter who they are, the two characters that she writes together, they fit, and they fit perfectly for each other. So it just makes me feel like I'm watching two people fall in love, which I feel like is weird, but in books it's just amazing, and this made my heart so happy. I love Talia Hibbert. She's definitely one of my favorite authors, and I'm always looking forward to whatever she writes. Alright, moving on. The next book that I have to talk about is The Gilded Ones by Namina Forna, which is another YA fantasy. This one is following 16-year-old Deka. She is living in anticipation and fear of the blood ceremony that every girl goes through when they come of age. And she's really hoping that her blood runs red, because in this world it can either run red like normal humans, or it can run gold. And if it's gold, they're like cast out of the society that they're living in. They're seen as demons. And then suddenly there is an incident in her village, and she ends up injured, and her blood is actually revealed to be gold. And because of that, she loses everyone and everything that she ever cared about. And after months of being tortured, Deka is finally rescued when a woman comes and offers her the opportunity to come fight for the emperor to earn her freedom. If you haven't read this already, definitely go and pick this up, unless you're someone who's not really a fan or can't handle like gory war stories, especially with like girls involved in them as well, which I don't know why that would make a difference. But if that's something that's gonna bother you, then you know, obviously don't pick this one up, because it's a lot more graphic. I feel like because of a lot of like the blood ceremonies and things like that, it gets a lot more graphic than you might expect. But this, like I said, was very much top tier, and I am so looking forward. Like, this was one of those highlights. Like, even, you know how you have one of those books, like, while you're reading it, you know that it's going to be a favorite. That happened with Rayberry, and that happened with this. I think out of all of the books that I read for the first time, those two are probably like some of my top two. Like, I don't remember what they got as far as like actual number rating, but while reading both of those, I was just like, that is going to be a new favorite, possibly like an all-time favorite, and I can see myself rereading multiple times in the future. So yeah, I'm already looking forward to rereading this one before the sequel comes out. And yeah, this is really good. Kind of switching gears a little bit, the next book that I have is Ace of Spades by Freya Abike Amita, which is a YA thriller, I believe. And this one is a dual perspective story following both Chiamaka and Devon. Both of them are going into their senior year at Nivea's private academy at the beginning of the story, and they're expecting to make the most out of this final year to kind of jumpstart their college careers. Chiamaka comes from a well-off family, and I think she's like half Italian, half Nigerian, or something along those lines, and she hasn't really had too many troubles besides like some petty rivalries with some of her classmates. But other than that, she feels like she's set herself up over the last 3 years to be one of the top students. She's going to get into the medical school she wants to, and things are going to take off for her from there. And Devon comes from a poor neighborhood. He's a scholarship student, and he's kind of just been trying to make his way quietly through his high school years. He is a musician. He has been working on this composition so that he can submit to Juilliard, because that's his dream of going to Juilliard, and he feels like it's finally within his grasp. However, at the beginning of the school year, these texts start going out to the entire school body, and it turns out that all of these text messages are focused on revealing secrets from both Chiamaka and Devon's past, and it starts to like get to the point where they realize that some of the things that are being revealed could possibly affect their futures. So because of that, they're trying to figure out who it is that's sending out these texts, why, and then of course, obviously, as you can expect, getting them to stop. So with this one, it's kind of like a weird thing that I thought this was so good, because I felt like this book made me so angry while reading it, which I think is why it ended up so high on my list, or so high in ranking, because there were just so many different things that went into this that made it like the perfect story. I did pick up the audiobook, and I'm glad that I did, because I think that it would have taken me even longer to get through this, because I would have been like so upset that because sometimes even then I had to like take a break from reading and put it to the side, and I was just like, I need to read something that's a little lighter, because this is making me want to go fight some people, and that is not in my nature. I feel like I'm not really talking about why some of these books got, or not going as deep as I would like, into why some of these books ended up on my favorites of the year. But just know that when I'm speechless like this is when I'm like really like, that's how I know that a story is really good. Because if I could still like nitpick at stuff, which I mean I can still with all of these books, but it got to the point where the little things that maybe I didn't really care for as much got completely overruled by everything else. This is one of those books though that I don't know, like it has readability. However, I don't know if I will want to reread it, only because it's gonna make me so mad again, and I don't want to put myself through that. But I could see myself rereading this in the future, maybe like in another year or two. But I am definitely still looking out for whatever this author comes out with next, because this was just so well done. Yeah, it was just good. It was good. And I'm gonna move on, because I don't want to try to sit here and talk about this for 30 minutes, because I probably could, but yes. The second to last book that is on this list is The Heart Principle by Helen Huang, and this one is the third book that is set in the same world of The Kids Quotient. This is another dual perspective, but we're mainly following Anna, and she has been struggling with her sudden success after a video of her goes viral. And then on top of that, her boyfriend suddenly tells her that he wants to have an open relationship, and Anna is kind of just like at the limit of what she can handle, and she decides that instead of doing exactly what he told her that she's going to do, which is just sit around and wait for him to come back. She's actually going to go out and try to date, maybe have a couple of nice stands. However, when she ends up matching with Quan, things don't actually end up turning out the way that they expected, because she ends up getting too nervous and like a bond begins to form between them. This was it took like an unexpected turn for me, because it had a lot more of the family aspects. Like it had the romance, it did focus on the romance, but I felt like this was one of those books that dealt with way more than just the romance. And I think a lot of that had to do with showing the best of Quan's character, and also like Anna realizing some things about herself that she never knew before. This was just more, I guess, than a romance, and I think that's what helped take it to the next level, because if it had just been about the romance, I feel like it might not have felt as deep as the previous ones. And the final book or novella that I needed to talk about, that's definitely one of my favorites of this year, not one I was expecting at all, and this one kind of slipped in towards the end of the year, and that one is Magic Dreams by Alona Andrews. This is novella 4.5, I believe, because I'm pretty sure it falls in between book 4 and book 5 in the Kate Daniels series. This is a novella that is following Jim and Dolly, two of the side characters from the main series. There is a magical forest that is residing in one of the PAC's headquarters, and Jim, as the lead or head of PAC security, decides to go check it out on his own, and he ends up with a magical sickness. And because of this, he decides to turn to Dolly, because he feels like she's definitely the only one who can help him at this point. And we're kind of following them as they figure out what exactly is going on, and then also, I guess, like the true start to their romance and their mating, or whatever it is that's going to happen with them. I went into this not expecting much. I usually don't expect too much when it comes to novellas. This is the first story in the world at all that like completely opens up more of Atlanta. If you've watched like my January mid-month, I talked about how, I think that was in that one where I talked about book 6 and how that like opened up the world of Kate Daniels. But this book specifically gives us way more of Atlanta than we get to see. There's a whole like Asian community that has their own folklore, which causes a lot of troubles when it comes to magical things. And like there's a black market. There's so much that could have been explored in this world that I felt like they gave the novellas, and I was like almost sad, because there was just so much in these little snippets that could have been full books. I'm like, you gave one of the characters, like Andrea, got a whole book where it was interesting, but I felt like it didn't really add too much to the story, because it seemed like something that Kate could have done, but it kind of just fell in Andrea's lap because Kate was busy with something else. There was just so much in this short little story that made so much more to the world, or added so much more to the setting of the story, that I was just like, I fell in love. It wasn't even about Jim and Dolly that I necessarily cared about. Like, I cared about Dolly and where she came from, her family, their whole background, and how her family's background, and as well as her background, how that added to the story. But like I said, it opened up so many other things that we get little snippets of when she's in the room and Kate is like throwing out ideas or asking for opinions, and then Dolly's like, oh well, what about this thing? But we get to see her in her element, basically, and it was just so freaking good. This was amazing. Like I said, all of these are 5 stars. It was a good reading year. Not as many 5 stars as I was hoping to, but I feel like the ones that stood out were definitely worth it, and I would be happy to still go through as many books as I went through, to only have this many 5-star reads. Now, with that being said, I think there might have been a couple that were on this list, but I decided to take them off of this list for the final video that I'm going to be filming. So I think there might have been like up to 3 more that were on this like 5-star list, but I just moved them to another video and I didn't want to mention them twice. But in the comments, let me know what were some of your favorite books that you read throughout the year. I'm always interested in seeing what everyone loved, and maybe I can even try to pick up some of these because I'm always looking for new recommendations. But if you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up as well as subscribe if you have not already. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you again in the next one. Bye.